Cedric Muhammad, the CEO of the Hip-Hoppreneur, welcoming you to our discussion of the stimulus package, the CARES Act. The hiphopreneur.com is the website. I want to thank you all for joining us via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram Live. And we get right to it. At a time of reflection, sometimes I read a lot of scripture. I came across one. One came to mind. Zechariah 4, it reads in part, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. And I have thought about that as a beautiful side of the attention that small business is now receiving, long overdue. The fact that they account for a net new job creation of 65% and are the true engine of the American and even the global economy. People have known this forever, but because there's been really no effective lobby for small businesses, it's become obscured. But one positive thing I will say about what has happened in a political context, as we talk about policy, strategy, and the spirit and mentality that'll carry us through this, is unlike 2008, where people actually believed and trusted that if you just shoveled out the money to the big banks, that they would be the intermediary to distribute it to everybody else. Nobody believes that anymore, and that's a positive thing. So people want capital direct. It's not perfect how it's being delivered, and there's going to be some issues with that we'll talk about a little bit. But the bottom line is that there's no intermediary like there was in 2008. So the sad fact, though, is that the small business that has been the life of so many of our neighborhood and communities is not the business that policymakers are serving with this over $300 billion in loans and grants through the CARES Act. The small business that they have in mind has as many as 500 employees, and the one that we have in mind may not have more than 10. Just look around your neighborhood. So the small business that we know and love does not have an advocate or a really effective lobby in Washington, D.C., and that's why I wanted to offer my voice today. I'm not a lobbyist. I'm not an advocate in that sense, but I do think those of us who have a perspective on how to connect monetary policy down to neighborhood economics, we have to come forward. So I wanted to take a look at the funding that's being offered in the name of small business. In fiscal year 2019, the SBA, the Small Business Administration, approved 51,907 what are called 7A loans. These are guaranteed loans by the government. They provided that many loans to 46,111 small businesses, and they totaled $23.2 billion in sum. In 2019, there were 1,708 active lending partners providing these 7A loans. So the 7A loans are provided by a bank. Government gives a guarantee. Those loans are then sold. I don't want to go too far into that, but it is very similar to the mortgage origination process in 2007, where mortgages were originated for the purpose of being sold. But the program does do a lot of good. But by my calculations, that's an average loan of $446,000. And clearly that is not the amount being targeted for the neighborhood small business that we're talking about, 10 employees or less. The SBA's definition for a small business is part of the problem. It can be as much as 500 employees with as little or as much as 20 million in revenue to be considered. So what are the chances, is the question I'm asking, of a business that has 2 to 5 paid employees competing, and not just in terms of merit, but competing to get a loan under these emergency loan funding programs? You're competing with a business that has 250 employees, already has a relationship with the bank, has a pretty good lawyer, has networked to some degree within the business community. What are their chances against a barbershop? I think they're pretty good. Also, under the 7A loan, something very peculiar, there's no job creation requirement. So you can get this for $150,000 and you don't have to create a job. Let's go to another loan program called the 504 CDC loan. Helps 6,008 small businesses, totaling $5 billion in fiscal year 2019. And that money is also distributed through what are called CDCs. These are like community development corporations, certified development corporations, do a lot of good work. 212 of those provided at least one loan. These loans are interesting because they go primarily toward fixed assets like land, structures, machines, equipment. They do not go to working capital. They don't help you with your inventory or paying your debt. So 6,099 loans in this area were provided to 6,008 small businesses, totaling $5 billion. That's an average loan of $819,806 by my calculations, which could be off. That is not the kind of loan that a small business or what they call a micro business with 10 employees or less is going to qualify for. Or if you do under the new standards qualify for, what are your chances of getting to the front of the line? Again, no advocate in Congress and sometimes at the state and local level for the truly small business. Now, there is a job creation criteria for receiving one of these loans, but it's kind of ridiculous. For every $75,000 that's raised through what they call a debenture, you only have to create one job. So you get $800,000 potentially, you only have to create 10 jobs. Again, keep in mind, this is for fixed rate. This is a fixed rate loan for fixed assets. Again, I have no problem with medium-sized businesses. We need them. But doing all of this under the name of small business is false advertising. And members of Congress know this. Now, let's look at the SBA's microloan program, which is more suited for the micro businesses, the true small businesses that we know and love in our communities. They provide up to $50,000 in loans to not just small businesses, but also child care centers, which I find peculiar. You know, why does a program for micro business have to share and split the pie with another great cause, child care centers? Again, when you don't have a lobby, you don't have a strong voice or a presence, you don't know how to put your program before Congress or a state legislature. This is what happens. Child care centers in their own right are worthy of humongous amount of funding. I'm just trying to make a point slowly but surely about the diminishing returns and the limited benefit of pursuing a lot of this emergency funding, although I would not dissuade anybody from attempting to do so. Just go in with your eyes open and don't allow it to substitute for your business model and other things you need to do to survive. But if you can get one of these loans or these grants as a form of self-preservation, I think it could be a positive thing. Now let's look. In 2019, fiscal year 2019, 5,553 small businesses received a microloan totaling $81 million. The average microloan was $14,735. There are no job creation requirements for this loan, which I have a slight problem with. But I mean, damn, with you just getting $14,735. So this is why we launched the Hip-Hoppreneur, the small business movement, where we're backing 3 businesses from Philadelphia, New Jersey, and New York area with $50,000 in cash and services. And we're giving more in cash than that microloan amount to 3 businesses. Nothing has stopped over here. We're still moving forward with that. And the time and the environment makes it even more important, I am and our team think. Doing this out of our own pocket and resources. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but the first time when we brought this up to people were, where's the money coming from? No, it's coming from me. It's coming from us. We're putting our money where our mouth is. There's no government grant. There's no corporation. There's no hidden sponsor. So I don't want to go off on that, but now's the time for people who talk a lot to do a little, at least. So we're having an Instagram conversation. I might go off a little bit on that one about the era for talking, being over. This is the era for silence and planning, preparation to do. Okay, let me come back on that. I'm sorry, little tangent on that. But yes, we are doing this out of our own pocket with our own resources because we want to show the reality of the truly small business. We want to prove the point that they are an afterthought. And most importantly, we want to show that with the right mixture of capital, expertise, and most importantly, inspiration, they can grow from 1 employee to 5, 5 employee to 10, 10 employees to 20, 20 to 100, and then 100 to 500. When you start with 500 employees as a small business, you miss 24 million small businesses. So if there are 30 million small businesses in the country, 80% of those don't have more than a paid employee. That's about 24 million. Why are you starting with the higher end? Include the medium-sized business, but start bottom up. Everything is so top down. That's why this is not going to work in a lot of ways. So along the way, we wanted to dramatize what the policies are that work in real time and against those business owners and what we can do to change things at the local, state, and federal level. So we're not just in opposition to what's going on. We want to make things better. But we can't do that unless we know what's going on and we confront what's negative and encourage what's positive. So, but more on that on Instagram Live this Wednesday coming up as we build into the lead up to announce the 3 winners from the Philly, New Jersey, and New York area on Memorial Day. I want to give a special shout out to all the people who know they do not live in Philly. You don't live in Brunswick, Newark, Trenton, East Orange, Jersey City, in New York City. But in spite of that reality, you still sent in your submission to qualify for the Small Business Challenge or Small Business Movement starting in the Northeast. I have tremendous love for all of you. There were some brilliant people in the Southeast and Southwest who just did not care. So I will we'll stay in touch with you. Again, go to the hiphopreneur.com, send in your information. We're going to be communicating with you more regularly. I apologize for not doing that in the past. So the problem from a policy standpoint, as we round this out, is that all of the emergency funding revolves or leans toward debt and grants. None of it deals with equity. If you have heard anything about promoting equity for the bottom business, helping them scale up, let me know. I had some really high-powered people in D.C. who've been looking and coming up with nothing. Also, nothing relative to boosting micro loan funding nominally with its own category. I'm not talking about folding microloans under 7A and 504 CDC lending. So there's nothing that makes it easier for us to raise money for our businesses from other people when the technology would lend itself. Even in social distancing, we should be able to raise more money than we have. The Jobs Act, which facilitated a lot of crowdfunding and rolled back some of the SEC regulations, is not a priority for this administration. Their priority is more opportunity zones. If you have an enlightened self-interest, you can get the benefit of both. But we'll talk about that more if you all want to have more conversations with us about that. So I want you to think about this in something that I have found very useful. It's the 5 sources of capital. It was offered first by a great economist named Reuven Brenner, who I've spent hours in conversation with. Consider him a friend. 5 sources of capital are: 1, your family and friends, kith and kin; 2, natural resources, oil, subsurface mineral rights, water rights. In my opinion, even your talent. If you come from a community that really doesn't have any of those, your talents and natural resources. That's the second category. 3rd is markets, commercial banking, stock market, bond market. 4th is crime. 5th is government. So what we are now effectively cut off from are the first three forms of capital through social distancing and the market volatility. The fourth element or source of capital was crime, which we want to stay away from. But you already know, with all this money flowing out, with very lax standards, with people hungry, you already know what's happening. You're seeing it, the fraud, the smuggling, all of those things are going to creep up. And as the weather gets better, and if we're not, out of these stay-at-home quarantine guidelines and rules, there may be some problems in the fourth source of capital. Believe that. So we are now becoming totally dependent on the fifth source of capital, which is government, which can really only offer debt and grants through the wealth distribution and its power of taxation. Where's the equity? Where's profit sharing? Where's risk finance? How do we open up the first source of capital, family and friends, as a source right now? We are living together in some cases. Unfortunately, some people are having a rough time with living with their in-laws, and the college grad undergrad has come home. But it's an intergenerational moment to maybe talk about how to raise money for a future family business or one that's existing and struggling. That can only happen through technology, policy, conversation. So we want to look again at the Jobs Act of President Obama, and something that I have written about for years, which is the potential for investment clubs to be deployed right now. And I don't know if it's because women tend to be the leadership. I call women the head economist of any society. They are the best when it comes to handling finances in any society. You go around the world, any informal savings tradition, women dominate it. I don't know if there's a bias against that, but there's an SEC provision that limits the number of people in an investment club. It goes back to like 1930. We need to look at that again. And that's something that we can talk about some more in the future. But again, going into debt and receiving a grant can get you through a rainy day, but it cannot sustain our livelihoods. I think, oppressive debt and dependency, we know when it goes too far, it diminishes the human will. It's demoralizing. So we have to get through what we have to get through now. But I am concerned that this is going to become a way of life. One exception to what I'm talking about is Senator Amy Klobuchar. She has a bill that does have equity in startup businesses in mind. S 3515, I think it's called the New Business Preservation Act. We should look at that. But from what I understand about it, and we'll keep looking at this from the trenches of Washington, D.C., is that there's more of an interest in helping venture capital, higher stage, bigger companies, the 500 employees, or the smaller scale, big idea businesses than a bottom up, smaller idea business. But there may be an opportunity to make what Senator Klobuchar is working on, S 3515, better and more relevant to the neighborhood economy. So let's follow that. Everyone, please, when I give like a suggestion like that, let's consider it as a call to action, for discussion and action. And let's use our numbers and learn more about what's going on behind the scenes. Because again, I got a pretty good view of the writing up of the CARES Act. It was dominated by special interests. And this is why those of us who have loyalty to one political party, this is not a good moment for you right now, because both parties are listening to special interests. And if you don't have an enlightened special interest that you know how to communicate, leverage the masses and the classes around, you are out of luck. All right, let's move to strategy. I want to talk about this in terms of 3 P's, maybe 4 P's: productivity, planning, and pooling. Productivity, I have an axe to grind. I won't name anybody, but you all have seen probably on TV individuals giving advice to entrepreneurs and business leaders. And the first thing they're telling you to do is lay 80% of your staff off. And some of the arguments that I've heard from brilliant people, they reference something called the Pareto law. I don't know if they know of it as the Pareto law, but the Pareto law, I'm going to give you some background. It's the 80-20 law, or it's also called the law of the vital few. And it's a law, or really a theory, that states that 80% of the effects in generally any undertaking are achieved by 20% of the causes. So it's somewhat of a law of cause and effect, which I like. And I do find it useful when you're having conversations shorthand about business opportunities. But historically, the law originated from the observation made by an economist, Vilfredo Pareto. He lived from 1848 to 1923. And he said that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. So I know a lot of you have heard 80-20, 20-80. That's where it comes from. And there's some truth to it. But the Pareto law has been claimed to have widespread socioeconomic applicability. And the practical interpretation of the Pareto law is that beyond a certain threshold, the marginal cost of improving a situation further becomes prohibitively expensive. So basically, once you reach that 20%, you can't go any further. But my problem with the Pareto law is how people are using it to justify these layoffs rather than as a way to make their own selves more productive and accountable. Apply the Pareto law to yourself, not just your staff that you deem non-productive. How can you make yourself more productive before you let go of somebody else? And of course, people are doing this because they don't have sympathy or empathy, because the individual that they're letting go, they're confident now can get unemployment insurance or some type of government assistance. So they want to make their numbers look pretty as fast as they can. But the reality of it is you might be able to hold on to a lot more employees if you made them more productive and made yourself more productive. So apply it to yourself. If 20% of how you think and behave produces 80% of your results, then look at your results. First, assuming 20% of what you do is good, do more of it and less of everything else. Assuming 80% is bad, do less of it and more of something else. Then start talking about laying off people, letting people go. Let's move to planning. We're talking strategy now. Back to my earlier point about the 5 sources of capital and family and friends. In 2014, the Pew Research Group did a study that found that the median friend count on Facebook was 250 people. And some of you know me, I talk about this magic number, 250. So that means basically most people, the middle number of the friends they had was 250 people. That's 2014. 1977, sales expert legend Joe Girard, he wrote a book called How to Sell Anything to Anybody, where he talked about the law of 250 and where he described how he learned from an undertaker that from experience from funerals, the average number of people who came to a funeral was 250. Then he later learned, this is Joe Girard, not Joe Girardi, Joe Girard. He said that the average number of guests a caterer told him at weddings was 250 people. So each of us has influence, for better or for worse, with at least 250 people. And each of them has influence with 250 people. So each of us should be planning right now to raise money from 250 people. We should be planning now to sell something to 250 people. And we should be planning right now to get 250 referrals for future business. 250 referrals, 250 new customers, 250 people as providers of capital. Next, I want to talk about pooling. Final point on planning, though. And Jay Abraham, another brilliant build a business mind consultant, he succinctly talks about there's only three ways to grow a business. One, grow the number of customers you have. Two, enlarge the transaction by changing the price, increase your sales. And third, increase the frequency of the transactions from that customer. So the second point, you're really getting more business out of the same person. The first one, you're getting more people. And the third one is you're increasing the frequency. So Jay Abraham says it much better than I did. But that's growing a business is not hard. It boils down to those three things. Okay? More customers, bigger transaction, more frequent transactions. So we can't, get out like we used to transact and interact, but we can still do so in a way that helps us barter and partner. So the emphasis now has to go on working with other people without necessarily changing money. And so I've talked about it. One of the most difficult things in business when you hire somebody or work with another group, the formula of commission, attention, money, and equity that you offer a person. It's like it's crazy. Some people are not motivated by money at all. They want recognition. They want praise. Other people want association with you. Other people just want straight cash. Straight cash. Other people want a piece of future income. So partnering and pooling with people is important. So although we're in isolation and we can't do everything ourselves, our goal has to be working collectively and collaboratively. And that's going to cause some of us to develop a different skill set. So I think it's important that you have a blueprint and you have a code to work the blueprint. I'm going to offer mine, what has worked for me, what inspires me, only because I want to create an environment where people feel welcome to share what has worked for them, what has intimately guided them. So blueprint for me, message to the black man, chapters on program and position in economic activity. Let me give you an example. This is from a Muslim perspective, and this can be applied universally. Let me just read something to you that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad wrote, author of the book. If there are 6 or 8 Muslims with knowledge and experience of the grocery business, pool your knowledge, open a grocery store, and you work collectively and harmoniously, Allah God will bless you with success. If there are those with knowledge of dressmaking, merchandising, trades, maintenance, pool such knowledge. Do not be ashamed to seek guidance and instructions from the brother or sister who has more experience, education, and training than you have had. Accept his or her assistance. There's a lot in that. One of the things that jumps out is the need for humility, the emptying of the ego, the loss of the self, to work with others in harmony. There's lessons from music that we can get into. I want to talk to a lot of my artist friends about how to take the science of music and apply it to the science of business. But imagine that was written 60 years ago. Imagine if those of us who have subscribed to that or been inspired by that had done that in the grocery business right now. My personal opinion, the bodega store, the corner store, the convenience store, the local grocery, whoever's running that, they're the mayor of whatever block it is. They know everything moving. They have the power. They have the power to, I don't even want to say something. You all know what's going on at these grocery stores. So not all good, but we got a little sidebar here. The emphasis on artificial intelligence and data sets and all this technology, we got away from something and it's been exposed. And that is, we do not have a working supply chain from the land to the man or the land to the woman that makes us self-sufficient. I'm a member of the African Union's first Congress, second and third Congress of African Economists. And in one of my proposals for a single currency and economic union for the African Union, I talk about and I reference so-called less developed village being autonomous. We're not autonomous. We may have more wealth. We may have more creature comforts, more luxury, but we're learning that we're not self-sufficient. So farming, I want to talk about urban farming in particular. I'm hugging right now all of the farmers in the rural areas of America. Salute you. You've been totally disrespected. But everybody's learning how important you are. But farming, organic farming, the importance of natural paths, healing yourself through food. All of these things are going to live past this crisis. And what position are we in to benefit from that? So any grocers out there looking for investment, I don't want to make an offer, like that, but I'm interested. And farmland. So I want to give a practical example of something going on in a specific state, back to policy, on how we can do more to advance agribusiness and farming and then tie it to retail. So the example in what I just read from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad on grocery business is a great example, because even Amazon, for all of the great things that they do, as progressive as they are, they're basically a convenience store right now selling toilet paper like everybody else. So this is a great lesson and maybe a dress rehearsal for something even worse or more extreme, or that will have a positive result down the road. So my other aspect to that is the blueprint. You got to have a model or a code to work the blueprint. Mine is the study guides from Minister Farrakhan, Self-Improvement, the Basis for Community Development. I just want to read one thing here. And again, whether you're agnostic, atheist, animist, monotheist, doesn't matter to me. I know you have a blueprint and a code. I want to learn from it. For some people, it's nature. For some people, it's astronomy. For other people, it's the intense study of history. Whatever it is, I would say I'm agnostic about that. Have great love and respect for anybody's belief system, but I have to share with you where I'm coming from. So here's a perspective here. This is from a speech that the minister gave in 1986. I just want to read one paragraph. He said, "This activity of land development going on in Phoenix, Arizona, and in cities around the country, and indeed around the earth. However, to those who spend those hundreds of millions and billions of dollars building structures, unless we build people, unless the human potential of people is developed, then man, in his underdeveloped state, will ultimately destroy the cities that he has built because of revolution and war." So these study guides are about self-improvement as the basis for community development. Now, again, whatever perspective you have, I want to learn from it. What I found illuminating in that was two things. A lot of us have gotten so deep into real estate development that we've gotten away from really developing people and entrepreneurship and business. We'll talk about the opportunity zones. That's one of my critiques of it. It's designed for real estate development. It's designed to advance fixed assets for an investor class. Not too much dealing with small business development, entrepreneurship. There are instances where that's going on. So that's the first thing. How many of us have spent more time trying to develop things than people? Second thing in there is underdeveloped human beings tearing down their society and what's been built. I mean, this is all about washing your hands. If true, if we had washed our hands better, if we had, I guess, respected one another's physical space, something like this may not have happened at the scale that it's happened. There's always been germs. That's just part of anatomy and physiology. But that we've been underdeveloped in a way we don't want to acknowledge. It goes back to my point about falling in love with technology and hating people earlier. So you need the blueprint. an economic blueprint, and I think you need a code that will hold you accountable and try to make you a better person. Because what disrupts business partnering and barter and pooling is disharmony in the relationship. So we fall in love with the business idea, the business model, the strategy, but the problem is going to be a human problem. It's always a political element because a business firm is nothing more than a society. You're dealing with human nature. So each partner in the business should be trying to make themselves a better person, and whatever code of ethics, inspiration, and that they can bring to the blueprint allows for the harmony. And so synthesizing all of these schools of thought, not for the point of arguing. I mean, anyone who wants to have an intellectual and ideological argument right now, when we're in a self-preservation mode, it shows you how large the ego has become. There's no reason to be arguing. It should be synthesize what's best in what each of us believe. Synthesize what's best from our references. In my life, my top references are soldiers, musicians, and plumbers. I learn a lot. I have learned probably the most profound principles economically from those three groups: soldiers, musicians, and plumbers. We all have references. Let's synthesize that. I don't have to argue about. I'll leave that alone. You all get my point. But again, on Instagram, we can talk more about the problem with isms. So it's kind of like DNA and RNA. The blueprint is the DNA, the code that you abide by. For some people, it's street code. In hip hop culture, that's real big. We know that. So the blueprint and the code working together, the pooling of resources, the partnering and the bartering is where we need to go. So I want to end on spirit and mentality. I have to be honest. I haven't had a bad day since this has been going on. And my prayers, first, my condolences go to those who have lost loved ones because of the virus and the chain reaction, because I think more people are actually dying from the reaction to the virus, positive and negative, than the virus itself. So my heart aches for you, and my prayers are for the relief of your anxiety and grief, and that you be comforted and know that the loss of the loved one wasn't in vain because of what this is all doing for the good. And so I offer condolences on behalf of the Hip-Hoppreneur to anyone who's been stricken by this or been affected, loss of a loved one, family, and friend. So for me, I haven't had a bad hour. The only time I get sad, or the only time I emote, and I'm moved, is when I think about some of us who feel we've lost our whole world. And I'm not talking about loved ones. I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about comfort level. I'm talking about idols who've been sick. I'm talking about the loss of mobility. And what it is showing me is all of us have attached our identity and our ego to habits and routines and rituals that are not permanent. And so it's a wake-up call. But the anxiety that the breaking of our routine is causing is deep. And it's something for all of us to study. So the first thing I have thought about is the need for acceptance. We have to empty ourselves of attachments, and we have to relieve ourselves of the need to hold on to the past and what was, and resist leaving the present to just focus on the future to escape. And we have to accept that whatever this came from, however it was caused, this is real. This is our reality. And so acceptance is part of the mentality that we have to have. And any sense of loss that we do have, which we all have, it can serve creative energy. It can become redemptive. And I will end on that point. Second thing is the need for patience. Again, I referenced a scripture from the Bible earlier. There's a scripture from the Quran that's meaningful to me. It says, nay, this is Surah 2, that's chapter 2, for those who are unfamiliar, in the 45th verse. It says, nay, seek Allah, God's help, with patient perseverance and prayer. It is indeed hard, except to those who bring a lowly spirit. So again, the emptying of the ego, humbling of ourselves, the acceptance of discomfort. This is a trial for all of us, whether you're a believer in God or not. Again, deep respect for any atheist, agnostic, animist out there. But there's a meaning of the word sabir that I have been exposed to that I want to talk about more in the future. But I just want to read the footnote on the word sabir that translates as patience. It says here, this is the Yusuf Ali Translation. The Arabic word sabir implies many shades of meaning, which it is impossible to comprehend in one English word. It implies 1, patience in the sense of being thorough, not hasty. 2, patient perseverance, constancy, steadfastness, firmness of purpose, systematic as opposed to spasmodic or chance action. That's 3rd. 4th, a cheerful attitude of resignation and understanding in sorrow, defeat, or suffering, as opposed to murmuring or rebellion, but saved from mere passivity or listlessness by the element of constancy or steadfastness. I think I'm looking up all those words. Constancy, steadfastness, resignation, cheerful, spasmodic, hasty, perseverance. These are universal principles and dynamics and elements of human nature and societal interaction that we should study, and cycles of society. Something Karl Marx wrote about suffering comes to mind. I'll deal with that maybe later on our Instagram chat on Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. But that's what I'm striving for, is to have that level of patience after the acceptance. And what you can get from that definition of patience is you don't just sit around doing nothing, and then you don't just do something because you can't sit still. This is different. This is somewhere in between those extremes where you're still working, you're still thinking, you're still optimistic, but you're not spastic. You're not emotionally unstable. Easier said than done. I mean, I know, but so acceptance and patience. And then lastly, adversity is our creative partner. Those who have volume 3 of my book, The Entrepreneurial Secret, know I dedicated a volume to really what we're talking about today. The first volume dealt with the political economy. Second volume dealt with business principles, strategy. And the third volume dealt with the personal struggle. It dealt a lot with suffering. I looked at suffering from religion, theology, sociology, psychology, and to develop a unified view of adversity and suffering. And what I found was that when a person feels a sense of loss, that's when they search for new activities and gamble on trying something different. And that's what this is. You say whatever you want. We've all felt a sense of loss. We're now opening up to new things. I don't think people are becoming more closed-minded. I think we tried that at first to give ourselves a level of certainty. But the bottom line is we're opening up and hopefully freeing ourselves of selfishness and ego and lust, anger, fear, envy, jealousy, avarice, all of these things that have been impediments to us. So a book I'm reading, did I bring it? Yeah, I'm reading a book on the Depression, the Great Depression. It's called A Great Leap Forward. It's by Alexander J. Field. It talks about the 1930s Depression and U.S. economic growth. It's a little technical, but those of you who want to read parts of it with me, it has a novel idea. It's backed up by some data that even in that worst economic time in the 1930s, after the stock market crash, There was more ingenuity and innovation in that time of adversity than even the war period, before the war period, and in the roaring 20s. So most economists have not accepted that, but he makes a strong case for that. And I use history as a reference there. I have a rule on books though. I'm not reading no full book. I'm not going to ask you to read a full book. So have mercy. If you want to recommend something, give me the section and like the page number. Matter of fact, I'm guilty of not following the rule. This is the book by Reuven Brenner, The Force of Finance, that I was talking about, that talks about the 5 sources of capital. We can go, if y'all want me to do this more, we'll keep doing it regularly, and I can give you the actual pages on that. But the first 2 chapters, Reuven deals with that. So again, adversity, the mother of invention. This is our chance to prove it. All of us to talk about the grind, the struggle. We understood it on one level. Now we're going deeper. So I want to hear from all of the small business owners and entrepreneurs in conclusion who are applying for microloans right now. I want to know what your experience has been. I'm not averse to learning about the 7A experience and the 504 CDC experience. Much love to all of you. Those are important programs, but I want to know what is going on with people who are getting loans for like $15,000 or less, maybe $25,000 or less. What's been your experience? Hit me up. Hit us up at the Hip-Hoppreneur.com or all of our social media properties. Want to know what your experience has been, best practices, and then we can start talking about what we can do to leverage our numbers, to just ask pointed questions, talking to the right lawmakers. And again, it's not just federal, local and state laws have a lot to do with this. And you independent contractors out there, one of the things I want to talk to you about is your legal form of business and whether you had a business account or a personal account at your bank. That's going to be an issue. The gig economy workers, much love to you. This is a difficult time because you are now at the back of the line. You got in finally on these unemployment benefits and some of these small business offerings. But again, how is the government going to process all of this stuff in a timely fashion? We cannot be dependent or waiting on that. And if we're going to get involved, let's get more informed politically on the details. And I want to help be a voice for that. And again, it's not about any class, creed, or color. This is about community and the neighborhood to me. So we all have one of those. All right. I look forward to seeing you Wednesday. It'll be me and some friends, 7 p.m. Eastern, a little more informal. IG live chat. We'll have some fun and just talk about what we've been going through. But I want to deal some more on policy, strategy, spirit, and mentality. My love and best wishes to you all. Cedric Muhammad, the Hip-Hoppreneur. Peace.